Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to LifePoint Community Church. This is week 2 of a summer series we're calling Creating a Rhythm of Life. And to help us today, we're looking at an ancient and unusual part of the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes. And the million-dollar question is whether or not life has any meaning. And if it does, what is it? Last week we learned that the writer of this book called himself the teacher. And the stance that this teacher takes is that no matter how much wealth you have, how much power you have, how much education you have, life is hevel. That's the Hebrew word for meaningless. One moment you're here and poof, the next minute you're gone. And what I suggested to you at the end of last week was that the very fact that life does have no meaning actually means life does have meaning, extraordinary meaning. And I want you to hang on to that thought because that notion is going to be weaved in and out of this series as we create a rhythm for your meaningful life. What this message is also doing is making a really good point that I think we should avoid extremes. The writer is challenging us on our behavioral extremes, on our extremes on wealth and pleasure, and is also challenging us on extremes of hyper-religious fundamentalism. Not everything in life is going to make sense. The human experience has limitations, and I think this text helps us or challenges us to accept this. I think it's actually crazy to think that we're ever going to make sense of everything going on in this world. I think some people have gone crazy trying to make sense of it. And this text is urging us to stop trying, stop living in extremes, and step back, right? Start observing, start observing creation and reflect on it so that we can learn about God and how to live well and function well in this life. And this is true wisdom according to this part of the Bible. So let's keep moving along. And today we're going to be looking at a very well-known part of chapter 3 called A Time for Everything. And you would think after reading this part of the Bible that the teacher is going to be talking about the ebb and flow of life. That the farmer has a time to plant seeds, and when he or she does that, the vegetables grow, and then it's a time for harvest. You would think this would be a great lesson of time management. But let's see what it says. Okay, the teacher says, there is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Do you see what I mean? With those words seem to be saying there's an ebb and flow to life. And this is the sort of familiar biblical wisdom that we are used to and comfortable with. But if you look behind me, you'll see lots of books, and most of these books are filled with wisdom. Most of these books are on the premise of living on how to live a better life. Whether it's a leadership book or a personal growth book, they are filled with wisdom and great advice. We live in a world and we expect a lot out of life. We work hard and we want to know that our efforts will pay off in the end. We know that if we want financial security, then there are certain things that we have to do to get that. We understand that if we want emotional intimacy, there are certain skills involved. We understand that if we want to be healthier, then we have to spend less at McDonald's and more time at the gym. We all understand that if we don't make our life work, then our life won't work. So it makes perfect sense and it sells really well to an audience such as this that it's time to plant financial seeds. It's time to heal wounded relationships. It's time to build our businesses. It's time to learn how to do the tango. It's time to lose some weight. There is a time for everything, the teacher says. But that's not the wisdom of this teacher. What this teacher is in fact saying is that there is a time for everything and there is nothing you can do about it. I used to play cards a lot when I was younger. And as you know how it goes, each person takes turn at shuffling and dealing cards. And the thing about cards is that some cards are better than others. And there is a certain randomness to the whole thing. However, the human brain does not appreciate randomness. And so it attaches meaning to things that have none. So when you get dealt a great set of cards and you subsequently win the game, you tell yourself the reason you won the game is because you're good at playing the game. However, when get dealt a bad set of cards and you end up losing the game, what do? You tell yourself the reason you lost is because you got dealt a bad hand. What the teacher is saying in our text this morning is that there is an ebb and flow to life. What he is saying is that sometimes you get dealt good cards, and sometimes you get dealt bad cards, and there is very little you can do about it. That is why when the teacher says that there is a time for everything, he means everything. Included in everything are the things that one does not want. This is not a prescriptive list of things that we ought to do. It is a simple descriptive of the way that life tends to be. And those of you who are a little bit older, who have been through stuff, will testify that sometimes life can surprise you. Sometimes life can do things to you that you didn't sign up for, that you couldn't have prevented and that you couldn't change. You can think that you've got life pretty much under control, that you've got a pretty good handle on things. Marriage is going well, children are doing well, RSPs are growing nicely. You feel perfectly healthy, and then something happens. The rug gets pulled from under you, and in those moments you realize that you've got far less control than you once imagined. And the fact, lots of life events are out of your control. And not only are they out of your control, they are out of your understanding. When the rug gets pulled from under you, your head immediately gets filled with questions, all of which begin with why. So in a nutshell, what this poem says is that life is full of lots of things, some of which we like and some of which we don't. There is an ebb and flow to life that you do not understand. And on that occasion, will take the wind from your sails, the money from your pocket, and the happiness from your heart. Now, as I said last week, the man who wrote these words is a man of intelligence and a man of faith. In other words, this is a man who knows things and believes things. And in these sentences, with his intelligence and his faith, he is trying to figure out time. And time is distressing because time confronts us with the boundaries and the limits of our human existence. I remember when I was young, my nana had this big clock in her living room up on the wall. It was lovely, but it was so irritating when you're trying to have a conversation because all you could hear is tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. It was like a countdown to the end of life. A reminder that to be a human is to live in time. And in time, stuff happens. Stuff you didn't expect. Stuff you didn't want. Can't change. Can't understand. Time isn't a concept. that hangs upon the wall in our homes. It is a condition in which we live. And if that proposition is correct, if we live in a time, and if in time stuff just happens. Let's look at the next verse of our text. In verse 9, our text says, "What do workers gain from their toil?" So, like I said last week, this is another one of those rhetorical questions. And as so, the teacher asks, and he thinks, and he wonders, and he invites us to ask and think and wonder about life. And so the question is, what is the point of you trying so hard when you have such little control over the events of life? If the curse of our species is that we are locked in a world of events that we cannot shape, if we are fated to consistently do things that make no ultimate difference, then what's the point? It's quite a dark question. And the writer takes it to a darker place. In the next sentence, he says, "I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race." So, having asked, what's the point of living in a world of events that we can neither shape nor understand, he then hints that he is about to arrive at some pretty negative conclusions. In Hebrew, what this sentence says is that I have seen the busyness that God has given us to be busy with. In other words, the fact that we are running around chasing our tails, juggling 100 things, burning the candle at both ends, multitasking, creating new plans, it's all God's fault. And we complain about our busyness, but secretly we love it. What is the one thing that we say over and over again? I have no time. We might complain about how busy our lives are, but the truth is, we like being busy because we equate busyness in life to meaning in life. If you are dying inside, if the emptiness is slowly killing you, the fact that you have a meeting to go to, or an event to attend, or an email to answer, chokes out the emptiness for just a few hours more. So this is our lot in life, the teacher says, to be busy. Busy doing things that make no difference, that do not matter, and that will all be forgotten. And then he says in the next verse, He, that is God, has made everything beautiful in its time. And of course, when he says this, he means it sarcastically. He does not mean beautiful as in, hey, I think that you're a very beautiful woman. He means beautiful as in, oh, I just lost my job. Isn't that beautiful? Or my wife just left me and took the kids. That's so great. Oh, I just found out that I have cancer. Isn't life just perfect? When he says that not only God made everything beautiful, next verse he says, He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Now, when the teacher says that God has placed eternity in the human heart, he is not saying that this is a good thing. What he is saying is that you live in time, good times, bad times, times of success, times of failure, times when everything is doing great, times when your world crashes down around you. As you live in that time, you intuitively know that there is more, that there's a bigger picture. And that awareness is tantamount to a curse. When the teacher is saying here, what the teacher is saying here is that you have been given the considerable misfortune of knowing that there is more to life, that there are mysteries and purposes, and that the whole thing that has some meaning, but because all of that is eternity and not in time, all of that eludes you. In other words, God has given you an itch that you cannot scratch. So when he says that God has set eternity in the human heart, he is saying it is a cry of frustration. He is saying it is almost as if God has baited us by giving us a desire for something that is simply beyond our reach. And then, in the face of such ambivalence, he turns his attention to more practical matters. It's almost as if at this point, one of his students had put up his hand and said, "Hey, teacher, if all of this is true, what should we do tomorrow? Like, what do we do with this knowledge that life is out of our control and we won't get all of our questions answered? What do we do with knowing that life is uncertain and that we are going to be dealt cards that we didn't want?" And so at this point, the teacher says, "Well, this much I do know." Verse 12, "I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil." In other words, the meaning of life is not something that you discover while reading a book or attending a seminar, because there is no meaning. All there is that there is. There is happiness. There is trying to do the right thing. There is sitting down in the kitchen enjoying food and wine with your family and friends. There is the pleasure in knowing that you are good at what you do. There is nothing better for you to be as happy as you can be for as long as you can be. And that sounds like a really nice, humane thing to say. And then you get to the last words of verse 13, and it all goes south when he says, "And this is a gift of God." What the teacher is saying, enjoy life as long as God lets you. Look at what the next sentence says. Verse 14 says, "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to, and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him." So the message is, enjoy your life while you can, if you can, for as long as you can. However, whether or not you can find such enjoyment depends entirely upon the generosity of God. If he has given you favorable cards, then well and good. However, if he has not, then it sucks to be you, because there is nothing that you can do to change his mind. And so the dark thought here is that what God does is forever. Nothing can be added to or taken from it. And then the darkness gets worse when the teacher then suggests that this was all designed to instill fear into humanity. Now, this is controversial because in the Bible, the fear of the Lord is a good thing. It leads to a life well lived. It's the traditional Orthodox view. We are to fear God. The fear of God is a good thing. It actually means reverence. However, the teacher of Ecclesiastics is having none of this. When he talks about people fearing God, he is saying something rather negative about God. He is saying God gave us a bunch of cards, allowed us to run wild, and then punishes us or rewards us according to how we followed him. So all of this is all very dark. And what it says is that life raises lots of questions, and the questions are beyond us. All we can do is enjoy life while we can, to the extent that God, the tyrant, allows us to. So what comfort can I offer you now? Well, some. When the teacher said that there is a time for everything, and then listed a whole bunch of antithesis that kind of suggests that one thing that never changes is that everything is constantly changing. So if you are having a hard time at the moment, just wait a while, because things can change. They usually do. And on the other hand, if at the moment everything is going just great, then just wait a while. Problems may find you. They usually do. Good times and bad times change places all the time, so don't be surprised. That's good to know. I also think that it's good to know that we are not entirely in control over the times in which we live. Now, that does not mean that we should totally subscribe to this teacher's cynical worldview. We have a little bit more respect for that. But nonetheless, sometimes it's not our fault, and we need to get over that. It's not our fault that the person did those things, or that the economy had that effect, or that cancer took that person long before their time, or that COVID came and changed the world. Martin Luther put it this way: it's none of our work to steer the course of providence or direct its motions, but to submit quietly to him who does. There is a king who reigns, and that king is not us. I also think it's good to know that in the absence of answers to our most pressing questions and deepest frustrations, that it's okay, that it's biblical to be ambivalent towards God. Doubt, anger, all of these are legitimate expressions of faith. It's okay to have issues with God. It's okay to have uncertainties and to be frustrated at the conundrums that the Bible raises. And the church, at least this church, is a place where those are welcomed. So go ahead, rage against the silence of heaven. Rage against the dying of your dreams. Rage against the injustices and the unfairnesses that have been perpetrated against you. Rage at how horrible your life is and how sadly it seems to end. And at the end of your raging, believe again that waiting for you with open arms is a God who promises you a future that is undiminished by sadness and unaffected by the failures of the disappointments of life. And finally and importantly, enjoy your life. Every day of it is uncertain, and its uncertainty fills it with meaning. Let me close with a prayer of an old preacher. And may God, the Father, Son, and Spirit abide with us throughout the remainder of our short, uncertain, earthly life and journey. And may you enjoy every good gift that God has given you to enjoy in this life. Amen. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.